the Ultra Low Emission Zone. The government don't care about the children that have got asthma. You know, another cash cow, another load of nonsense. Hello, I'm Marcus Hayes, back for another rant on road. As usual, let me know in the comments what you want to rant about at the moment. But today, I want to rant about the Ultra Low Emission Zone, also known as Ulez. Now, the way that I view politics, the way that I view how politicians behave, call me a conspiracy theorist, but yeah, the way I see it is that basically politicians, their job is to look after the rich. You know, all policies that come out are basically there to improve the lives of the rich and to take as much money as possible from the normal working class person and put it in the pockets of the rich. You know, it's all designed to make the gap bigger between rich and poor. You know, all political parties are basically funded by the rich, and it's a circle because the rich sort of fund the parties, whether it be officially or sort of with backhanders, and then the politicians continue to make policies that improve the lives of the rich, and then in return the rich give the politicians money. So it is a big circle that's never going to end in our current system. The only problem is that there's more people in the country that are not rich than are rich. So essentially, if you're a good politician, you're able to make policies that improve the lives of your friends, you know, the rich people, but also somewhat persuade the people that aren't rich that it's going to benefit them as well. So, you know, that brings us on to Ulez, right? You know, to try and persuade everyone that it's a good idea to pay this tax every day to drive into London, or to go out and buy another vehicle, of course, because if you've got the newer vehicle, you don't need to pay the Ulez. But if you go and buy a new vehicle, you know, who owns the companies that sell the vehicles? You know, rich people, right? So, you know, it's still another way of directing money to the rich. You know, it's going to encourage more new vehicles to be bought. A lot of these are paid for on finance. Again, you know, who's going to be earning from the interest you're paying on your finance? The rich people. But, you know, to persuade people to either pay this money every day or, you know, go out and get a new vehicle, they dress it up in this way to say that it's for the environment, etc, etc. It's going to make everyone's lives better, it's going to make the air easier to breathe, etc, etc. And look, I'm not saying that, you know, it's not tough for someone who's got asthma and they're living in a city. You know, I'm sure it's absolutely terrible, but that doesn't mean that it's okay to ruin thousands of people's livelihood, you know, who can't afford to buy a new vehicle or can't afford to pay the daily amount. You know, that child with asthma, they're not more important than the thousands of children who might be now living in poverty because their parents can't continue with the business that has been paying for their food. So I don't see that as an argument, but you know, often when we're persuaded to do things by the media, ultimately by government, they use these sort of emotional arguments, right? They'll put the kid with asthma on the news to make you feel sorry for them and make you comply, right? But ultimately, the government don't care about the environment, the government don't care about the children that have got asthma, and the government don't care about the businesses that are going to go under, who might be owned by the people that can't afford to pay the Ulez or can't afford to upgrade their vehicles. All the government care about is, you know, making policies that are going to take money away from the people that aren't rich and give it to people that are rich, you know, to increase that divide between the rich and poor. And, you know, they'll say that the money that comes in from the Ulez, they're going to put towards initiatives that are going to, you know, help the environment, etc, etc. And in my opinion, that's all a load of nonsense anyway. Money's not even real. You know, when the government want to fund something, often something that no one's voted for, they just print more money, which essentially makes everyone's money worth less. So if you're the kind of person that's working a normal job, it basically means that you're poorer. You know, you've basically got a pay cut. But you know, the rich whose businesses are growing, and you know, they're investing in things that are giving them higher returns than the losses that are created by this quantitative easing and stuff like that. They're not affected by things like that. In the same way, they're not affected by these policies like Ulez. So yeah, I find it very easy to pick holes in any arguments that government give us as reasons for them to bring out these policies that don't benefit us, that are detrimental to people, and that do seem to take money away from the poor and give it to the rich. But you know, when you view politics the way I do, it's no surprise, because in my opinion, a politician's job is to take money from the poor and give it to the rich. And yeah, I just see Ulez as a cash cow, as a way, you know, as an excuse that they've sort of got reasons for to take money from people that are poorer, you know, people that can't afford that newer vehicle, the people that are struggling to keep their businesses afloat, you know, but do need to come into London. You know, it's a way of nicking another load of money from those people on a daily basis. And look, ultimately, if they can't afford it, then they're going to go bust. You know, they're not going to have their own business anymore. They're probably going to go and get a job working for one of these big companies that are owned by the rich, you know, because ultimately, although the government bang on about, oh, small businesses are the backbone of Britain, it's a load of nonsense. The political class, the rich people, in an ideal world, they would have us all working for these big, massive multinational companies. You know, we'd all be employees, right? So they don't want everyone to have their own individual businesses. No, they want everyone to be working for massive companies which are controlled by the rich, because then everyone's essentially controlled by the rich, right? If they want you to think a certain way, behave a certain way, and you know, you're working for a big company, then they can just bring in policies that say, look, you know, unless you follow this way of thinking or this certain behaviour, then you know, you're going to lose your job. And we saw that in, you know, what happened in the world a few years ago, where people were literally losing their job because they questioned the way that that pandemic was being dealt with, and they could see things didn't add up. And I was one of them people as well. I could certainly see that things didn't add up in that certain situation, and yeah, I was kind of worried at the time the job that I had, I might end up losing it, but I was prepared to lose it because of how I saw things that were going on. But you know, I digress. So yeah, this is one of those issues where you can sort of veer off down multiple rabbit holes when you're discussing it, right? Because you know, it is all, in my opinion, interlinked into this big idea of politics to yeah, take money from the poor and give it to the rich. And I think having the view that I do with politics kind of makes it a bit more simplistic to understand, right? And look, the system wants us to all be confused, because whilst you're confused and not really making head or toe of what's going on, you're more likely to just sort of blindly trust what the politicians are saying and what the media are saying, and you know, just go along with these things, right? It's a lot easier to just go along with these things than it is to sort of look into things and question things, right? And I'm the kind of person that does look into everything, and I do sort of research everything. I don't take what the media says as face value, because the more and more you look into things, the more and more you realise that basically everything that the media says and everything that the government says is a load of nonsense. However, I'm also the kind of person that tries not to invest my whole life in sort of battling against these things. But you know, I'm not here to tell anyone else that they shouldn't be, you know, actively protesting against things. To be honest, I think it's kind of cool that in certain areas the Ulez cameras all keep getting cut down. Obviously the government will plough money into reinstating them, but yeah, it kind of does make me feel sort of good that people are standing up for things. It's just that I personally wouldn't go out of my way to, you know, to do things like that myself, right? Because I personally believe that that energy spent could be better used trying to get yourself into a position where some of these policies don't affect you as much. Now, that might be for some people to become rich, but you know, a less extreme version of that would be to try as much as you can to live within the loopholes that are there within laws to enable the rich to not be affected by things, right? See, Ulez is kind of genius because it fits into what I've said, where you're literally trying to take money from the poor but not the rich, right? Now, Ulez isn't going to affect the rich because the rich are able to afford the newer vehicles, so they won't have to pay Ulez, right? It's only going to affect the people that can't afford to upgrade their vehicles to follow the rules, right? So it's kind of genius that it only affects the poorer people. But you know, even things like the fact that classic cars are exempt from Ulez, like to me, that's just another obvious sign that the legislation or whatever has been adjusted to suit the rich, right? Because your rich people all have classic cars, you know, they all invest in classic cars. So of course they're going to adjust the legislation to say that classic cars are exempt, right? Because the rich people want to be able to drive their classic cars around London without having to pay the Ulez fee, right? So, you know, you can live within that loophole. You know, I'm into classic cars. When I heard that the Ulez was going to expand out to where it is now, I'm talking about London, of course, yeah, I kind of thought, oh, I'm going to have to go and get myself a cheap modern car, you know, just get something really cheap on finance just so that I can, you know, drive around, right, and drive to and from work, like at the time. But you know, as it happens, there is a loophole that means classic cars are exempt, so that's great. I can live within that loophole. I can carry on driving a classic car every day. Now, it's not to say that keeping these classic cars on the road is cheaper than going to get a really cheap car on finance. It isn't, you know, but it just so happens that, you know, my hobby means that I want to drive a classic car every day, and I can because of that loophole. And there's loads of loopholes in life like that, right? You know, all the financial loopholes that, you know, somehow by coincidence mean that rich people don't need to pay their fair share of tax. You know, if you've got your own business, you are able to legally benefit from those loopholes as well, you know. The only people that can't are people that are on a PAYE job, working for a big company, etc, etc. And yeah, they would love us all to be working for those companies, as I've already said in this video, right? Because then we won't be able to benefit from those loopholes that are essentially set up just for the rich. So yeah, you need to sort of, like, in my opinion, instead of putting a load of energy into rowing amongst ourselves about these policies, right? You know, with the Ulez, the person who's got an older vehicle is going to be rowing with the mother who happens to have a kid that's got asthma, and while we're rowing amongst ourselves, we're not actually looking at things for what they are, which is the rich trying to shaft us all, right? So yeah, you know, you can put your energy into trying to find those loopholes where you can maybe make these policies that are aimed to look after the rich not affect us as much, right? Even during the pandemic, right? You know, we were all on lockdown. Well, I wasn't. I didn't break a single law in terms of the lockdown, but I wasn't on lockdown at all. There were loopholes, you know, that I was able to exploit, right? You know, for instance, you were allowed to travel for work. Well, at the time, I had two jobs. I had my day job and I was a YouTuber. So in my eyes, if the camera was on, I was working. So, you know, that was just a simple little loophole in terms of that particular policy that I didn't agree with. In terms of the Ulez, you know, there are certain things you can do to your car that mean that you won't get a fine through your door. Now, I don't want to say no more than that. I don't want to ruin it for people that are, you know, utilising these methods. But you know, you can find out about these things that you can do that mean you won't get your Ulez fine, right? You know, there are ways and means of you living within the loopholes of life to make these things not affect you as much. And I think you're better off putting your energy into seeking those loopholes than, you know, arguing amongst ourselves and yeah, missing the point. So look, that's what I think. about the ultra low emission zone. I think it's a load of nonsense, just like most policies that our idiot politicians come up with. I think it's a genius way of taking money from people that aren't rich and giving it to people that are rich. And unfortunately, I don't think, no matter how many of the cameras get cut down, it's ever going to stop. If anything, you'll see that as more people, you know, end up just naturally getting vehicles that fall into the category that means that they don't have to pay Ulez, they'll just move the goalposts, right? For instance, the electric cars, which are, you know, exempt, right, because they're low emission. Well, from the very little research that I've done, you know, electric cars, the batteries and stuff, apparently, they cause more harm to the environment making those than the harm that would be caused to the environment to have a normal petrol car, right? Because, you know, petrol engines now are really, really fuel efficient, they're really low emission, etc., etc. Oh, and the other thing is as well, like, electric cars, you know, they're bringing out electric cars that can drive themselves, electric cars that are obviously hooked up to GPS and stuff to enable themselves to drive themselves. Don't you think, like, it would be quite easy if, say, for instance, in the future there's another lockdown and they don't want you to leave your area or they don't want you to freely travel, it'd be quite easy for them to turn off your electric car, wouldn't it? Like, I'm pretty sure that technology isn't, you know, far-fetched to think that they'd be able to do that. Anyway, if they do manage to persuade everyone to get into electric cars, I can already see that they'll just move the goalposts later on. So at the moment, you've got an ultra low emission zone, yeah? Too much emissions, so we're gonna have to charge people, you know, to try and reduce the pollution. Well, once everyone's got an electric car, I can see them just coming up with like a tax, because it's such a strain on the electrical grid. They could call it like a ultra low electricity charge or something, yeah? They'll just move the goalposts. In the same way, years ago, they persuaded everyone to scrap their cars to get a diesel, and then years later, they then started finding people that had these diesels that they literally forced people to buy because of this low emission zone. So, you know, they'll just move the goalposts eventually, and then, you know, that will just prove that it's all a load of nonsense. But by then, you know, everyone's sort of forgotten, everyone's getting on with their lives, you know, and you know, then it's kind of too late, right? The same with the pandemic thing. All the things that they said were conspiracy theories. It's years and years and years and years later that you hear that a lot of them weren't conspiracy theories and they were actually correct. But, you know, because it's been years and years and years later, most people have forgotten, most people have moved on, or most people are so invested in the nonsense at the time that they're quite happy to sort of, you know, they don't want to be wrong, right? So they're quite happy to, like, dismiss the truth when it does come out. So yeah, I think Ulez is just, you know, another cash cow, another load of nonsense, another attack on people that aren't rich, you know, another attack to try and make less people have their own businesses and, you know, less people be sort of self-sufficient. And yeah, that's my opinion on it. But as always, interested to hear your opinions in the comments of this video. I'm actually almost at my other garage now, so I am going to end this video here. As always, if you're a regular viewer of my content, please do give the video a thumbs up. If you're new, welcome to the channel and click subscribe for regular videos based around my life with my cars. Check the links in the description to follow me on social media. My email address will be down there for anyone who wants to contact me. Huge thanks as always to my patrons for your ongoing support. Check out my website and the Petrolhead Style website. A link to both of those will be in the description as usual. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.